September 2025. Mid-Atlantic Ocean. A massive operation known as Iron Reprisal is already in motion. In this alternate timeline scenario, a fractured political relationship pushes NATO into launching a coordinated strike against the continental United States. A dramatic, unlikely what-if engineered purely for strategic analysis. There's no surprise attack, no sudden missile launch. This story begins with a diplomatic break. After withdrawing forces from Europe, the U.S. formally exits NATO and disables shared defense infrastructure. Overnight, the alliance loses access to American satellites, intelligence feeds, GPS networks, the backbone of its modern coordination system. With that sudden vacuum, NATO leaders rush into a desperate plan. The mission isn't conquest, it's pressure. Disrupt U.S. military command, neutralize strategic forces, and force negotiations before tensions ignite into global disaster. But doing that requires moving men and machines 3,000 miles across open ocean with no American intel, no American logistics, and no American satellite support. It becomes the boldest multinational military undertaking of the modern age. Here's the strange twist. These militaries know each other better than any rivals in history. They train together. They shared tactics. Now they're forced to use those very playbooks against their former partner. This scenario exists purely as a controlled, fictional simulation, a sandbox where the usual boundaries don't apply. NATO issues a 96-hour warning before the strike. Evacuation routes open. Troops move under strict radio silence. Ships roll out of Europe like a steel tide. But almost immediately, cracks show. Without U.S. satellites, NATO must rely on Europe's Galileo system, which is slower, easier to disrupt, and not combat-proven at this scale. And it's not just navigation. Advanced aircraft like the F-35, Black Hawks, and artillery systems depend on U.S. maintenance pipelines and software updates. They can fly, but every hour in the air drains irreplaceable resources. Still, the alliance pushes forward. Because hesitation means failure. For staging, troops assemble in Greenland, Iceland, the Azores, and parts of Canada. Cargo ships stacked with vehicles, fuel, and ammunition stretch across the Atlantic. A floating city of warships, logistics vessels, and escorts. The strike divides into 3 synchronized offensives. One primary assault. Land on the Virginia coastline, aiming to disrupt operations at Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval hub on the planet. 2 southern thrust. Hit the Florida Panhandle and attempt to seize Eglin Air Force Base, undercutting U.S. coastal defense. 3 northern incursion. European units stationed in Canada push through Maine and Michigan to create pressure on the northern command structure. NATO destroyers, tankers, and amphibious ships move in tight formation. But without the U.S. ISR network, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, targeting becomes guesswork. Missile precision drops. Reaction times lag. Units struggle to maintain cohesion. Success depends on speed. In this scenario, if it doesn't work fast, it doesn't work at all. Then, before sunrise, the East Coast erupts. Cruise missiles streak toward U.S. bases from Virginia to Georgia. British and French fighters escort transport planes carrying paratroopers aiming to secure highways during the brief confusion. Special forces target a missile facility in North Dakota. Helicopters skim low toward beaches near Norfolk. The plan is straightforward on paper. Smash the docks, capture the port, and create a protected route for incoming armor. But the United States responds instantly. Patriot batteries intercept dozens of missiles. Aegis destroyers at sea cut down threats. F-22 Raptors surge upward like ghosts. The 82nd Airborne moves to seal highway choke points. The 101st Air Assault lifts out of Fort Campbell. Marines deploy mobile anti-ship missiles along the coastline. One French vessel drifts out of formation. A U.S. submarine takes the shot. Hundreds of NATO personnel never reach the beach. The first wave suffers heavy losses. From inland, U.S. rocket systems rain down precision strikes. Apache helicopters stalk stalled convoys. Coastal missile batteries shred amphibious transports. Some armored vehicles sink before touching land. Then come the long-range bombers. B-1s launch standoff missiles from bases far beyond NATO's reach. And with interior supply lines intact, U.S. armor rolls out from Georgia, Texas, and Kentucky. Within a single day, American heavy units move faster than NATO drones can track. That is the advantage of defending home ground: shorter supply lines, intact infrastructure, and near-instant mobility. Then the cyber battle begins. NATO launches aggressive digital strikes. Some East Coast grids flicker. GPS signals distort. Emergency networks receive waves of fake distress calls. Rail systems lag. Banks slow down. Panic spreads among civilians. But U.S. Cyber Command expected this exact play. Backup satellite channels restore targeting data. Military networks switch to hardened fiber lines buried beneath the ground. And when the U.S. fires back, the results are devastating. European command centers lose satellite feeds. Drone views vanish. Undersea cables are disrupted. Targeting info becomes outdated. U.S. cruise missiles suddenly land with perfect accuracy, demolishing fuel stores and artillery positions. NATO forces stall. Then geography turns the battlefield into a trap. The Virginia coast is flat, swampy, and filled with choke points. NATO armor gets stuck. Supply routes compress. To the west, the Appalachians block all easy inland movement. In the Midwest, wide-open terrain exposes NATO columns to bombers and drones. Meanwhile, the U.S. moves troops effortlessly across its national transportation network. Rail, highways, and airports remain untouched. Units from Colorado, Arizona, and Pennsylvania deploy east in under 72 hours. NATO relies on a handful of vulnerable ports, and they still haven't captured a major one. By day 4, U.S. submarines sink cargo ships nightly. Convoys scatter. Supplies run critically low. NATO holds fragments of Virginia, parts of Florida, and small pockets near the Canadian border, but nothing stable. They needed fuel, ammunition, replacement parts, reinforcements. None arrive. The U.S. floods the interior with National Guard brigades, and defender numbers surge. NATO's F-35s run out of missiles. Tanks need fuel. Artillery shells are gone. And the beach remains a bottleneck. Then comes the U.S. counterstrike. 3 full divisions, 1st Cavalry, 3rd Infantry, and 1st Armored, surge toward Norfolk. The 82nd secures the flank. Marines reinforce the south. Rocket artillery pounds retreat routes. Attack helicopters swallow resistance. French Leclercs and German Leopards fight with extreme discipline. British paratroopers attempt a desperate breakout toward the sea. But air support is gone. Communications are fragmented. Logistics are finished. The beachhead collapses. Florida falls. Northern forces retreat into Canada. Hundreds of NATO soldiers surrender as units are cut off. At sea, the HMS Prince of Wales is struck and disabled. The Charles de Gaulle suffers drone strikes. Remaining ships withdraw as U.S. submarines pursue them across the Atlantic. The fictional war ends decisively. NATO's assault collapses under broken supply lines, technological disadvantages, improvisation issues, and the overwhelming geographic and logistical power of the defending force. Was victory possible? Only if NATO had seized a deep water port, neutralized U.S. air power, and forced negotiations in under a week, a near-impossible timeline. Instead, the momentum breaks, the fleet shatters, and the campaign unravels. Now imagine something even more extreme. What if the greatest armies from across history were dropped into a confrontation with a modern American base? Tap the video on your screen to find out.